Well, a severe, big meteorite shower. I'm talking about chunks that are, well, some of them might be a kilometre across, and they may come with a lot of accompanying debris coming in at the same speed, smaller chunks. Impact is that it turns if you're in an ice age, the ice sheet, which is a kilometre or two, several kilometres thick, impacts the ice, which is rock, of course, and crushes it. The instant is a crush. And this might be right down to some of the ground underneath the ice. And the liquefied ice that's under the ice sheet, because of the tremendous pressure of the ice normally, it's all crushed in an instant. And then it responds by trying to come back to equilibrium in pressure with the rest of the environment. And that is a fantastic explosion, of course. Each piece that makes contact, each piece of the meteorite comes down and makes contact at this speed and impact, crushes the ice, and possibly as deep as any rock underneath, so that you get craters underneath as well, and crushes the liquefied ice that's under the ice sheet. The explosion is a tremendous heat and force which blasts the ice sheet into smithereens, and of course releases this liquid ice that's under the ice sheet, which for a moment, of course, still has its pressure and is expanding at a fantastic rate, along with the liquefied hard ice on top, and the gasified ice sheet itself, pieces and bits, of course, that are showered off in the fantastic explosion. So the ice sheet is now punctured with this liquid ice underneath no longer having the pressure. So all the liquid ice reservoir in the vicinity is now released at phenomenal speed, because the pressure has gone off and it's springing back to what it would like to be, which is ice, and if it's got enough heat around, steam, therefore, water and steam. So there's this, if you like, from the center of the impact, there's liquefied ice moving at speed. Further out, there's ice that's being smashed to smithereens by it and being driven along. Further out still is the ice that's turning to steam, which is, well, radiating out from the impact as well. With this liquefied ice similarly finding its equilibrium at great speed, I mean, the whole thing is just catastrophic. That is possibly the description of the Younger Dryas of, I don't know, 10,500 BC, somewhere around there, that turned the rock to spheroid crystal-like glass, where the impact achieved such, left craters, that were underneath the ice, and of course now we don't get covered in ice except in Antarctica, and well, would rip out the canyon, not in a matter of weeks, a matter of moments, as this, depending on the speed of whatever is able to channel out in whatever direction it takes, wherever the weakest point is. And, you know, on something like the moon, you see the star effect. I mean, radiating out from an impact. The sort of blast rays marked on the surface of the planet afterwards. Well, of course, liquefied ice from under the ice sheet being released into the atmosphere is well, it's following its path of least resistance, which is where the puncturing in the ice is. And as it expands, it cools, of course, and shifts back from liquefied ice to ice, and if there's still a lot of heat around, shifts from ice to water to steam. At some point you've got water gushing out, but at the same time steam as well, in as far as this water is not cold, of course. Well, some of it is, but you know, some of it could be very warm indeed, and steaming off something. You know, it's a rush of steaming water. It's like, well, picture dropping your kettle full of water on the floor. Don't stand near it when you do this. Don't do this. Just imagine it, right? That'll be enough to give you a picture. Yeah, I mean, it's going to cause havoc on anything it releases. It finds release towards, isn't it? You know, we're going to strip mountains down to the volcanic cores, aren't we? And if you look at the sort of badlands, we can see this, and you know, you're going to get Grand Canyons formed in, well, I mean, this is the overspill. This is just the minor trace of, or rather the trace of the fringe of this activity where the water's gushing out across the land, and it's probably hot and moving fast, and just rips out any of the softest rock it does. And yeah, it's like cleaning your drains. Put enough liquid and pressure down there, and it cleans the river route very successfully, rips out everything it passes, and it passes on the least resistance, lower ground and so forth. Canyons are ripped out in as long as the draining continues, I suppose. Much of it initially, of course, is extremely quick in close proximity to the impact. I mean, absurdly quick, explosion quick. Further away, it's settlement and debris shifting and so on. What's happened to the planet? Well, the planet's got a lot of steam, cloud, burst into it from the ice sheet. And a lot of dirt too from both the incoming object, the asteroids breakup shower that was hitting the surface, and also, if it's penetrated deep into relatively shallow ice, or deep into deep ice, it may still give craters underneath, so that rock has turned to dust as well as it, evaporates on the impact. After the impact, I should say, really. The impact it crushes, but then the release is the showering into dust and smoke, so to speak. The planet goes dark for quite a while. In as far as the meteorite shower results in dust, it's interesting that the white snow and ice now of the planet is now dirty. That's of no real interest while the atmosphere is dirty anyway and the sunlight's not penetrating very well. We talk about the summers failing with perhaps volcanic outrush of smoke, and this would be, well, not to mention, I suppose, that such an impact could well cause such a bang on the Earth that it gives triggers a bit of volcanic activity in various places, which would chuck out a lot of dust as well. So that could be a contributing factor. And I'm just wondering if the ice that's left on the rest of the ice cap, or whatever you call it, covering the ice age stuff, if that's dark, even when the smoke clears, well, the smoke's cleared onto the ice, which means the ice now receives rather than reflects. And as the ice melts in the sunlight, because of the absorption of heat under its covering of dust and dirt, then it continues to melt and sea levels continue to rise. And that may be the major effect. In other words, it brings the end of an ice age. And, well, a lot of destruction, but it's the new Earth, isn't it? Where the land's been cleared and the sunlight now hits the soil, and whatever has survived in this ice age for however many thousands of years, and what survived the end of its ice age too, any life that has survived, now has a rather clear field to develop and multiply, in as far as it is still adaptable to such conditions, which hard to say if the whole Earth's been covered in ice for a while. If it's that sort of ice age, then but in an ice age like we see the last one, of 10,000 or so years ago, finished then, 12,000 years ago, isn't it? 10,500 BC looks like the end in that sense. And the end may have been quite fast, in that the rest of the ice melts over the next, I'm not sure how many years to get through. I mean, presumably the bulk of the ice sheet is still left. It's just that if it's covered in dust and dirt, it's melting rather than reflecting the heat of the sun. It's absorbing it and melting So I don't know how long it takes that to melt. No, let's say it's pretty noticeable in a few years that this is what's happening, and perhaps after 100 or a few hundred years, it's very clear that the ice sheet is receding at a fair old rate. So the ice age could clear up, quickly in prehistoric terms. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, give it 1,000 years and it's all gone. It looks much like North and South Pole on the planet. There's hardly any left. I mean, relative to covering the large part of the Northern Hemisphere, Oh, and Southern Hemisphere. And I'm reminded of those extraordinary old maps that seem to show the existence of Antarctica and a coastline that might reflect an ice age coastline of very low water, seawater level, when the much of the ocean's water is actually heaped up as ice on the ice caps, especially the Northern Hemisphere. Northern Hemisphere because, of course, there's more land, high land, if you like, and it's not being circulated and moderated by ocean, like the Southern Ocean. It's strange, really, because the Antarctic, of course, is continent. It is land. But the waters around it are not enclosed by land. It's more like land enclosed by water. Whereas the northern polar cap is water enclosed by, Asia and North America, with a bit of a gap into what we call the North Atlantic, both sides of Iceland, if you like. So in drop of temperature conditions, the ice cap looks much more pronounced in the northern hemisphere than in the southern. Although it does look like, you go back far enough, we've had ice ages that cover the entire planet, and it's just an ice ball. It presumably still rains in an ice age. I mean, the ice is reflecting the heat of the sun, but not 100%, is it? The surface has got water molecules bouncing off into the atmosphere, which must build up cloud, which will rain. Well, as snow, of course, and sleet, or snow, and so I gather you still get rainstorms during an ice age. You still get clouds. The clouds tend to reflect the sun before it hits the surface of the ice. So that reduces. I wonder if you basically just get clouds but not much rain. You get some rain where there's higher ground. I don't quite imagine the snow necessarily being higher than like the highest mountains, and they would therefore cause the evaporated ice into the atmosphere, steam of course, would cause them to rain. So it might still rain on the mountains. Presumably the highest mountains are not covered in ice. Perhaps they are. They're just covered and of course, in other words, glaciers are moving down the slopes of the mountains that are constantly receiving some rain, so as snow, of course. Yes. So the mountains are covered in snow as well. It's just that they're still mountains. There are peaks in this ice sheet according to the terrain underneath. Something like that. This is really going a bit far now, but imagine the pressure. Oh, that's interesting. The snow, the ice sheet, has come from the ocean water. We're not assuming that it's been fed by an enormous amount of comet water. We're just saying it's normal, sort of not raining down comets and asteroids normally, and therefore the ice sheet is simply the effect of evaporation and snowing down and the temperature dropping and so forth. Which of course may have been triggered by volcanic activity that chucked out so much material that the sky basically went dark and the ground froze as the water vapor that is in the atmosphere snows down and stays down white on top of the dirt that's settling from the volcanic outbursts on the planet. When the smoke clears, the dirt's there in the ice, but the snow is on top and it's white. And the whiteness reflects the sun's heat and the planet continues to cool, condensing any moisture that is coming off of the surface of the ocean still, and it continues to cool, and in the colder areas of course it just stays white and so forth, and the land in the colder areas tends to receive the snow, the condensing vapor that is lifting off from the tropical areas still. And this continues as the ice sheet expands. The amount of evaporation slows as the area of the ocean is reduced. Not quite clear what makes the complete snowball effect. Ice ages, in a sense, in this sort of scenario, are more likely to just give you partial ice covering of the planet, because the ice covering slows as the area of evaporation of the ocean water becomes less. I'm not quite sure what condition would give you even all the surface of the ocean freezing. Interestingly, as the ice builds up over, for argument's sake, a colder part of the ocean, the pressure pushes the remaining water as that ice sinks into the ocean in the colder area, it pushes the liquid ocean further towards the equator, if you like. The equatorial water level is the higher as that sinks into it, but the lower according to how much of the ocean water is being used to manufacture the ice, so to speak. Interesting sort of, situation going on there. I'm really trying to think, is there any way that life can continue with a complete snowball ice covering? Don't know. Given the astonishing variety and adaptability of life, I'm saying yes. And, if nothing else, it's those volcanic vents, subterranean, that are going to keep some energy and warmth such that life could continue. But it might take an awful long time for such life that survives a snowball ice age to then adapt itself to populating the planet. But I don't know how many millions of years we need, and we've got quite a few in the Earth's history. Yeah. Thank you, Dad. Just to add, we are saying, aren't we, that the main damage is coming from the liquefied ice, which is a huge reservoir, just waiting, and that quite honestly, the asteroid is just a trigger by comparison. It's the trigger explosion that opens the door, and when you open the door, my goodness, oh gosh, it just rushes out. It's the pressure of the ice over, in this case, imagine, say, the northern hemisphere, much covered in ice, several, kilometre thick or so, in much of it, or more. And such liquefied reservoir underneath is suddenly released. That's the damage. Now, of course, some of this meteor shower might just, for instance, just plunge into part of the Atlantic Ocean that's not covered in ice, in which case, what does that do? Well, I presume it gives a rather nasty tidal wave. And perhaps we're not talking about one piece, we're talking about a shower. I don't mean they're all a kilometre across, I just mean that one or two of them might be enough to really puncture the ice sheet where it is going into the ice. But, that going in, even a meteorite going into the ocean, it's not going to be a quiet affair. It's going to give some tremendous sort of, well, like chucking a rock in the lake, isn't it? Only on a grand scale. Yeah. So, anything can happen now in this mayhem, can't it? As I say, volcanic things, plate pressures in the Earth's crust suddenly having that extra little boost of energy, which would just cause havoc, a few earthquakes. And it's as near the end of the world as you can get from life's point of view without the planet being removed, It's catastrophic. And perhaps it happens every, a couple of times every 26,000 years. What is it when we're, can't remember, something about when the equinox is. I think it's to do with the elliptic orbit of the Earth around the Sun is like a flat disk that's wobbling, and when we're at the extremes or passing through a certain part, as the disk lifts and lowers, wobbles side to side. If we happen to be on a less usual point on the disk, when the disk is out of its more middle type position, then we run into asteroids and that we haven't picked up before, whereas most of them we've cleaned up in the past, long before man is on the planet. But there's some bits that we're going to stray into occasionally, every 26 or 13,000 years or whatever it is, and we mop up a few of the debris that's still left around us, and that debris is just interstellar debris, perhaps, or even the result of a wrecked planet that was torn to pieces. It's like the asteroid belt, we suspect, is the ruin of some planet, and then maybe other things that are, other times when we can get the odd asteroid, and I think there's one in Siberia, wasn't there, which was pretty big. When you look at the planet's surface and you look at something like the Caribbean, that shape, including the curve there of Miami, you get the impression that a giant asteroid could have just dropped there at some prehistory date, don't you? I mean, sort of thing that could have caused the end of the dinosaurs and other occasions when it could have caused the end of any fairly sophisticated life on the planet. Well, what we'd probably think of as human life anyway. Yeah. Thank you, Dad. You're just adding a note. It occurs to me, listening to this recording, Hudson Bay didn't look too reasonable either. It's a bit sort of circular. You wonder if that isn't some pre-ancient historic impact at some time. We look at the moon, its pockmarked surface. The Earth's the same, If you get this sort of seismic photography from the air that shows the compression in the land underneath you, the Earth's littered with craters, certainly in some places, been filled in by, more relaxed material, less concentrated, but we're a bit like the moon that's been fuzzed over by erosion and water and so forth. But yes, a lot is hidden that's gradually being revealed. And we find the same with traces of early man and their sophistication, don't we? The wonders of these, what do you call them? Is it monolithic stone structures, whatever they're called? Pyramids and so on. It's not easy to date them, really. And some of them we just see something like a temple that's the tip of the iceberg, and underneath is this huge complex that's built by, wow, we don't know how, really. We're not even clear we could build it ourselves sometimes. Be very costly anyway. Might take a bit of research and ingenuity to cut stone like seems to be cut on some of these structures, or move it. There's more things in heaven and earth than your eye have ever dreamed. Thank you, Dad.